In the Roaring Twenties, two worlds collided. One southern, rural and traditional. The other northern, urban and industrial. America was in motion. Record companies sent scouts across the United States, searching for new artists and sounds. They traveled to remote regions, auditioned thousands of everyday Americans, and issued their music on phonograph records. It was the first time America heard itself. The artists they discovered shaped our world. The Appalachian Mountain Range was the western frontier of America's first British colonies. Over the centuries, its isolated rural communities preserved and evolved their own dialects, customs, and music.
Oh, I'll twine with my mangles and waving black hair, with the roses so red and the lilies so fair, and the myrtle so bright with the emerald dew, the pale and the leader and eyes look like blue.
Though poor in material goods, the mountain folk are rich with tradition, and none more so than the founders of modern country music, the Carter family.
My name is Dale Jett, and I'm the grandson of A.P. and Sarah Carter, and I'm sitting on my great Aunt Maybelle Carter's porch as we speak. This area has been Poor Valley as long as I've known it, and I grew up half a mile from here. It may not look like it, but as the name implies, it's a poor area. There's not a lot of work here, and it's pretty rugged terrain. Hillside farming is about all that you can do around here. So, you know, whether we like it or not, we're in what a lot of people refer to poverty-stricken Appalachia, and we are indeed. But in this area, these big porches lend themselves to people just hanging out and picking music. And to me, music, that's probably the most important thing to come out of Poor Valley.
The mountain folk had always sung and played together, but those familiar sounds were transformed by A.P. Carter into a popular style and a national career. And like every great country song, it all started with a love story.
Clinch Mountain's about 3,000 feet, and my grandfather A.P. was over in that area selling fruit trees, and he went up a holler one evening and said he heard the prettiest singing that he'd ever heard. He just, angelic voice.
Bring back my boy.
You know, it just pulled him up the holler, and it was Sarah.
She was sitting out on the porch, and AP stopped over there. He wanted her name and everything, because Aunt Sarah was beautiful. She was one beautiful woman, and she had that gorgeous voice, and he just fell deeply in love with her.
Sarah was actually selling china, you know, mail order dishes, and AP bought all the dishes that he could afford to try to put himself in good graces.
Oh, her voice was out of this world. Everybody noticed it. I mean, all she had to do to get a crowd in was to get out and sing on anybody's porch.
Bring back my boy, my wandering boy, far, far away, wherever he may be.
He worshiped her, I really believe, from the time that he first heard her singing in that holler across the mountain. I don't think that he ever lost that love.
After old
A.P. and Sarah married, started a family, and began singing together with Sarah's teenage cousin, Maybelle.
Aunt Maybelle, she was the kindest, sweetest person you ever saw, and one of the most talented. She was a musician and wonderful car driver. She could do anything. She taught herself the guitar when she was 6 years old, I think. Not much to do, so to pick up an instrument and start playing. She did it with such ease. It was like it was no struggle with her. It was just there.
Tell me, is my darling still true? Sweet Fern, sweet Fern, sweet Fern, I'll be just as happy as you.
You know, they didn't really have any influences because in Poor Valley there were no record players, there wasn't radio, there wasn't television. I mean, the only influences they had were family and friends, was the people immediately around them that you heard live and firsthand.
The Carter family played only at home and for small local gatherings. But the world outside Poor Valley was about to come calling. For 30 years, record companies had marketed their music primarily to the urban middle class. But by the mid-1920s, that audience was switching to the new technology of radio. Faced with plummeting sales, the record makers turned to rural and ethnic consumers, who were being ignored by the national broadcasters. They sent recording teams south and advertised for musicians to come and audition.
Well, this was in about 1927, and the first time that we'd ever gone out on the road. So we would decide we'd record, for instance, in Johnson City, Tennessee. That would be mentioned in the paper, and the word would get around in churches and schoolhouses that somebody was going to come down there to make some phonograph records. And these people would show up from sometimes 800 and 900 miles away. How they got there, I'll never know. And how they got back, I'll never know. They never asked you for money. They didn't question anything at all. They just were happy to sing and play. They had made a phonograph record, and that was the next thing to being President of the United States in their mind.
Field recording sessions organized by producers like Frank Walker immortalized Americans from every walk of life. The Victor Talking Machine Company hired Ralph Peer, a man with a proven track record, to find and develop new talent. Peer's landmark recordings already included the first hit record marketed to an African-American audience, the first hit by a white country musician, and the most important artist in the history of jazz. He was the man who caught lightning in a bottle.
I have a favorite saying. It's the art of being where the lightning is going to strike. And how in God's name you can detect that, I wouldn't know. But I've always been able to do it.
Ralph Peer must have been a visionary because he saw potential in music and acts that I don't think anybody else really did. And he was very much in favor of ethnic music and also promoted, acts that some of which became legendary later on that would never have been recorded without his support.
Ralph Peer recorded the music of everyday working people. He was using the revolutionary new Western Electric recording system, which for the first time could capture the true sound of voices and instruments. It was the beginning of modern sound recording.
I'm Craig Regis. My grandfather, Elmer Regis, was a Western Electric engineer. And he helped develop the electrical recording system at Western Electric that Ralph Peer and others took on the road with him. When they went to these makeshift studios, they couldn't just plug it into electricity. It was not a stable source, so they had to take wet cell batteries similar to these to run the system. The artists basically had a single take to record. If they made a mistake, they had to scrap what they were doing and do it over again. So there were no overdubs or anything like that because there was no mix. It was all one take, one microphone, recorded onto a wax disc.
What's great about America is someone will work hard in some garage or basement somewhere and invent something incredibly culture and life-altering for everybody to experience. And the next step is to figure out how we can monetize and make money off of this. And that's the part that starts to get really interesting, because once you are aiming to try to make money off of a format of some kind, then happy accidents start happening. And that's how we accidentally got all these amazing artists to record who never would have been recorded.
In the summer of 1927, Peer traveled to Bristol, Tennessee, and set up his recording equipment in the empty warehouse of the Taylor Christian Hat Company. He placed an article in the local newspaper, tempting musicians to come and audition.
So here we have a copy of the Bristol News Bulletin from July 27, 1927, which was just at the start of the Bristol sessions. And this was typically a way my father, Ralph S. Peer, would look for new talent. And so the story reads, "Mountain songs recorded here by the Victor Company. This morning, Ernest Stoneman and company from near Galax, Virginia, were performers, and they played and sang into the microphone. Stoneman receiving 100 and each of his assistants 25. He received from the company $3,600 last year as his share of the proceeds from the songs." Now that was a lot of money in those days, and believe me that a lot of people who had talent said, "Gee, I'd like to give that a try myself."
After you read this, if you could play C on a piano, you're going to become a millionaire.
The news of Peer's session attracted dozens of performers to Bristol. J.P. Nestor from Galax, Virginia. Ernest Phipps and his Holiness Singers from Corbin, Kentucky. And an aspiring singer who drove across the Smoky Mountains from Asheville, North Carolina. His name was Jimmie Rodgers.
All around the water tanks, waiting for a train, 1,000 miles away from home, sleeping in the rain. I walked up to a brakeman to give him a line of talk. He says, "If you've got money, I'll see that you don't walk. I haven't got a nickel, not a penny can I show. Get off, you railroad bum," and he slammed the boxcar door.
Jimmie Rodgers brought a new bluesy flavor to country music. But country's deep traditional roots will forever be associated with another group who showed up at the Bristol sessions.
AP had been to Bristol one day, and he had heard about this guy, Ralph Peer, looking for new talent. And of course, he was insisting on going. They were, "Oh, that's way out there. We don't need to do that. Nothing good will come of it." But he persisted.
It would have been a difficult task to sell Sarah and Maybelle and that we're going to go record in Bristol, which would have been a big journey itself. So he had to coax them to go.
Maybelle was pregnant with Helen. Uncle Eck didn't want her to go because she was in her close to her 9th month.
And Sarah had Joe, who was still nursing.
Of course, AP was very persistent.
It took them all day to get from here to Bristol. They had to ford creeks, they forded the river, and they were in a Model T constantly fixing flats.
There was muddy roads, you know. They didn't even have gravel roads. It was mud tracks. So they'd been trying to get there any way they could, and you know, Aunt Maybelle was 9 months pregnant, didn't feel very good, and every time she hit a bump, she didn't know, you know, we're gonna have this baby out here or what.
When they got in the studio that day, they said that they went in the back way because they were ashamed of the clothes that they wore. They didn't have stage clothes. They didn't know anything about that.
They came in to record and brought the children dressed in rags, and he's dressed in overalls, and the women are, you know, the country women from way back there, calico clothes on. Yeah, they looked like hillbillies, and that's just what they looked like. But on the very first test record, what I recall distinctly, as soon as I heard Sarah's voice, that was it. You see how I began to build around it. And all the first recordings were on that basis.
My heart is sad and I'm in sorrow for the only one I love. When shall I see him? Oh, no, never till I meet him in heaven above. Oh, bear me under the weeping willow, yes, under the weeping willow tree, so he may know where I am sleeping, and perhaps he will weep for me. They told me that he did not love me, I could not believe it was true, until an angel softly whispered, he is proving untrue to you. Oh, bear me under the weeping willow, yes, under the weeping willow tree, so he may know where I am sleeping, and perhaps he will weep for me.
The 2nd day of August, 1927 was my first record. Well, they just had an old building that we recorded in. It wasn't a regular studio. It was just an old warehouse. They cut on a big wax. And if you make a mistake, you have to shave it off, you know. You couldn't erase it like you do a tape. And a lot of times we should have done it, but we didn't, you know. I'd say, please do that over. And when it come out, it'd come out with a mistake on it, you know. He said, well, that makes people listen, you know, to see what's going to happen next.
Tomorrow was our wedding day, but oh Lord, oh, where is he? He's gone to seek him another bride, and he cares no more for me.
We were extremely lucky in the 1920s and 30s that rural artists were recorded that would have never been recorded had these companies not wanted to sell records to rural people. And a lot of these songs have changed the world, really. They changed music, they changed popular music, and they changed popular culture around the world for the last 100 years.
Oh, bear me under the weeping willow, yes, under the weeping willow tree, so he may know where I am sleeping, and perhaps he will weep for me.
Those Carter family records are treasures that are passed from generation to generation. To this day, if you're lucky enough to have the Carter family 78s that are in good condition, when you pass them down along with, you know, great-grandma's Victrola, with extra needles that haven't been opened from back then, you can't even imagine what that is. They were really very popular. You know, and the backbone of, you know, any kind of country or old-timey music.
Oh, listen to the train coming down the line, crying
that first trip to Bristol, they recorded 12 places like Camden, New Jersey, New York City, Memphis, Louisville, Charlotte, Atlanta. And after all of that, they recorded 326 songs.
My baby's left me, she even took my shoes, enough to give a man the doggone gray blues. She's gone, she's solid gone.
I grew up hearing all their songs, and I was a huge fan of theirs all my life. Mother Maybelle and the Carter family, they were the founder and the starter of a lot of great artists across the board. Well, I think once you hear the original Carter family, you don't have to explain why they were special. It all was.
Oh, can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a bitter home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
I always heard that the Carter family, that they didn't charge widows and orphans at a performance, and I know that seems odd, but there was a gentleman walked up one day, he said, when I was a little boy, he said, I went to a Carter family concert, and he said, I paid my 15 cents, and they give it back to me. And so I know it's true. I mean, that touched me. So, I mean, that, and I'm sorry, but that tells me it was about music and not about money. And I mean, it's the way it ought to be.
Can the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by? There's a bitter home awaiting in the sky, Lord, in the sky.
In the 30s, during the Depression era, AP and Sarah separated, ultimately divorced.
He was gone a lot. She was home a lot, and she didn't really care that much about going after the music. She liked kind of being at home.
I think he was brokenhearted because he worshiped Sarah. I mean, I'm not sure that he ever really wanted a whole lot, more so than to make music with her.
He didn't just lose his wife. He lost his showmanship, and he loved that part of his life. And he was a sad man, more than anything, the fact that they weren't working together anymore.
I mean, that was his passion, and I can't help but believe if you were alone that you would have to think back about those times and the songs and the lyrics and the love. I would think that would be really foremost on your mind. I know that Ralph Peer paid him $50 a song and a half a cent a record, and to my knowledge, those royalties never changed.
Of course, they thought that was great. Whoever heard of getting paid for something that you really loved doing? That's what they always said. Can you believe this?
You know, yeah, maybe they should have gotten more. I don't know, but they got enough. It was enough to get them through the Depression, and it fed them. It put clothes on their children, put shoes on their feet. It let grandchildren like me come along.
Ralph Peer. Yes, I've met him. Came down to the Foe once, and we were still little people, you know. But here comes Ralph Peer in this big Cadillac. And well, no, he had a bar inside of it. Everybody was looking inside that. They were used to moonshine. They wasn't used to having that fancy bar. And that was a big sight for everybody to see. But, you know, without Ralph Peer, they wouldn't have gotten anywhere anyway. I mean, who's going to come out here from New York and look up people to promote? But he did that.
After the original Carter family from 1927 to 1940, Maybelle went on to have her own successful career, and Elvis even toured with her for a time. And then in Knoxville, she picked up a guitar player by the name of Chet Atkins, and they took him to the Grand Ole Opry. And I mean, Chet Atkins changed the whole way that things were done in Nashville. And then June Carter, Maybelle's daughter, she married Johnny Cash, and then that led into yet another love story. And then June's children, you've got Carlene is a successful recording artist. She married Nick Lowe. Roseanne Cash, who's a singer-songwriter, married Rodney Crowell. Cindy Cash married Marty Stewart. It gets really complicated. It's hard for me to keep track of, but all of that came from that first recording trip to Bristol, which Johnny Cash referred to as the Big Bang of country music.
Hey, that sound that you hear there, that's the sound of the original Carter family, who were just elected to the Country Music Hall of Fame. The original Carter family were A.P., Sarah, and Maybelle. And tonight, for the first time together in 27 years, Brother Maybelle and Sarah Carter. Mama, I've long been a Carter family fan, as you well know, and I'd love to take Uncle A.P.'s part on one of those fine old hymns.
We'd love to have you, John.
How about that, Aunt Sarah? All right.
And my soul is singing in that promised land above. I'll be satisfied, praising Christ the Savior for redeeming grace and love. I'll be satisfied, I'll be satisfied, satisfied, I'll be satisfied, satisfied, when my soul is resting in the presence of the Lord. I'll be satisfied.
Many of the songs that the Carters developed, these songs have become popular throughout time since then. And you can hear a lot of songs today that if you listen just a little bit harder, you can understand the original Carter family songs were at the root of these.
You know, there's so much music and so many branches to that tree that came from three people piling in a little car in 1927 and leaving here to go to Bristol, and leaving pretty much right where I sit.